Welcome to today's video. Today I want to talk about my 3-watch collection, and to be completely honest, this is a video that I'm kind of almost nervous about, probably because calling these 3 watches a collection might be a bit of an overstatement, but nevertheless I am really happy with my collection, and therefore I just kind of wanted to talk about it. So let's get into it. So just to give you a bit of background where I'm coming from in terms of my watch collecting history. Well, I started to get into watches about 5 or 6 years ago, and that was when I began my time after I got my law degree from university and I started to work as a legal clerk. And so with this being my first job, if you like, after university, it was pretty much the first time in my life where I had a bit of cash on hand. Not huge amounts, but enough to actually consider buying something like a mechanical watch. And that is exactly what I did. That is also around the time when I really got into like proper EDC stuff. And so within a fairly short period of time, I started by buying one of them Psycho Turtle watches. First one was with a black dial and yellow/golden numerals. And while I really liked that watch, it was a bit too, I don't know, out there for me. So I sold that guy and bought another Seiko Turtle, but this time the Paddy version, which is essentially the same watch but with a blue and red color scheme, a bit reminiscent in terms of the colors or something like a GMT watch, but obviously without the GMT functionality. It's just a diver's watch, and I was really happy with that watch, but I also wanted to have something that is a bit more formal, so I bought the Seiko Saab 033. And yeah, that was my watch collection for some time, but after about 2 years or so, when I got done with my time as a legal clerk, I decided to sell those watches and spend a bit more money on top to buy my first proper watch. And that was basically to celebrate the milestone of becoming a lawyer. And just mind you, when I say that, I'm not taking anything away from those Psycho watches. I actually really kind of regret selling them. But anyway, my first real watch that is definitely a keeper is this guy, the Sinn 104. So obviously the Sinn 104 is still by no means a really expensive watch, at least not when you compare it to most of the kind of luxury watches that are out there. It cost me, I think, 1,400 euros there or thereabout when I bought it in 2019. And my reasons to get this specific watch were because I wanted to have something that I could wear every single day, meaning that it is robust enough, it has enough functionality, it looks good, and it is very flexible in terms of its looks. So it's not only like a dress watch, but also not only like a sports watch. And yeah, I think the Sinn 104, especially in this version with the black dial, really does fit that bill. It's made in Germany, it's very robust. In my opinion, it's also very good looking, and it does certainly work in a more formal setting, but also in just very casual setting. It is obviously also an automatic watch, meaning that it is self-winding, and the design is fairly timeless, so I'm not worried that this will go out of style anytime soon. It's also not too big in my opinion, so it's got a 40mm case, and at its thickest point it is about 12mm thick. And that is also something that was quite important to me, because especially with the Seiko Turtle watches, which are about 15 to 60mm thick, I sometimes struggled a bit to get them below my shirt collar. One last thing that I really value about this watch is that it is not trying to be anything that it's not. So with some other watches, especially kind of cheaper watches, you do sometimes get a bit of a feeling that they are trying to kind of look like a well-known Rolex or another well-known model of watch. And while you might say that the Sinn 104 kind of sort of goes into the same design direction as something like a Rolex Submariner, I think that the design is different enough, and certainly also the functionality, so that you don't have to feel like you're wearing a Rolex Pretender watch. So yeah, anyway, the Sinn 104 has certainly served me well, and I do love that watch, and I have no desire to sell it or get rid of it, but there are still some negatives about it. First one being the fact that this watch malfunctioned because of magnetism twice. So somehow, don't ask me how, the watch got magnetized, even though it does have some slight protection against magnetism, and I had to send it back in to Sinn. They fixed it completely for free. Took them a couple of weeks, but no issues whatsoever in terms of the customer service. But yeah, that meant that I did have to go through the trouble of sending the watch back, and I had to live without the watch for a couple of weeks. No big deal really, but for me that means that I do have to be a bit more cautious about this watch when I'm around magnets, which is the case pretty much all of the time, because especially with something like the magnetic keyboard that I use on my Apple iPad or even my iPhone or whatever it may be, all of those things use magnets, and fairly strong magnets at that. So yeah, that is kind of annoying, and I wish that it would be a bit more resistant to magnets. The second thing that I got kind of annoying with this watch, especially working as a lawyer, is that the clasp, while it is very beautiful in my opinion, first of all, it doesn't have any like quick adjustment mechanism. So the only way to do some micro adjustments if your wrist swells up during the day is by using a small pin. And secondly, that clasp does have a tendency to really dig into your wrist, especially if you're wearing it while typing on a keyboard for longer periods of time. So that's just something that you have to be aware of. And that was one of the reasons why I decided to get another watch. And this time around I wanted to have something smaller and something that would be less noticeable on the wrist while wearing it. And the watch that I decided to go for is this guy. The Junghans Maxbill 34mm in the Handwinding version. Now I gotta be completely honest, I was really not sure about this watch when I was in the process of getting it or buying it or thinking about buying it, because first of all, 34mm is fairly small. I do have a medium to large size wrist, so I was kind of afraid that this would look really wimpy on me, but in my opinion at least it doesn't. And I think part of that is because of the fact that the actual watch face isn't really much smaller than the one on my Sinn 104, and because of the fact that the dial is kind of silver white-ish, it looks a bit more prominent on the wrist than a black dial watch would. Another thing I wasn't quite sure about is the hand winding mechanism and the fact that this doesn't have a day or date function, but to be completely honest with you, I've never missed the automatically winding feature, and nor did I miss the day-date feature. It's just kind of become part of my routine to wind it up every morning when I want to wear it, and honestly I rarely ever have to glance on my watch to figure out what day or date it is. I usually just know that. So now that I got it, I actually really do like that this is just a hand winding watch, which also means that the case of the watch can be really thin. I think at its thickest point, the watch case, including the glass, is just 9mm thick. And therefore, it also wears really easily on your wrist. Most of the time you will barely even notice that you got it on your wrist. And so this watch has really quickly become my all-time favorite watch, and also kind of an exit watch, which I didn't expect, because when I got into the hobby of collecting watches, or when I started with my watch journey, I kind of expected to just add more and more watches to my collection. And there are certainly still watches out there that I would consider buying if money wasn't an object. But honestly, if I could only keep one watch for the rest of my life, I would keep the Junghans Maxbill, and I would be completely delighted. This watch is pretty much perfect in my opinion. And one other fact that I was kind of nervous about when I got this watch was that it does have a very bad water resistance rating, and it only has an acrylic glass. So I was pretty much expecting to get water into the case in no time flat, and also to just scratch or completely shatter the acrylic crystal within just a matter of weeks or months. But much to my own surprise, that hasn't happened yet. Not even close. And I've really not babied this watch. I have worn this watch while out hiking. I've worn this watch while riding a motorcycle, riding my mountain bike, while working in a wood shop, pretty much doing absolutely anything that you could think of. And this watch has been through it all. The acrylic crystal still looks just absolutely fantastic, barely any scratches on it, and I've never had any issues with any kind of water or moisture getting into the watch. Now, I haven't used it while swimming or under the shower, but honestly, I'm really not looking for a watch that I can wear while I'm swimming or under the shower for that matter. So yeah, in terms of robustness, the Junghans Max Build, much to my own surprise, seems to be more than robust enough for my day-to-day life. Just FYI, this is not the watch strap that the Junghans Max Build came with. It's watch strap by Hirsch, which is, I think, an Austrian company. I do have a couple of their watch straps and I really like them, especially because of that quick detachment mechanism, but I've also just grown to like leather straps. So anyway, after buying the Junghans Max Build, I was pretty much set with my watch collection. But last year in September, I bought another watch, but I didn't buy it because I wanted to have another watch, but more because of its overall functionality as a wrist gadget. And so the last watch in my 3-watch collection is the Apple Watch SE2 in the 40mm variant. Now again, I didn't buy this watch because I wanted to have another watch, but rather because I wanted to have the added functionality, especially in terms of monitoring my workouts and activities. And that's pretty much exactly what I got. Now, to be completely honest, I was kind of tempted to just buy the Apple Watch Ultra, which was released around the same time, but I think that watch is a bit too big for my likings, and honestly, the added functionality when I compare it to the Apple Watch SE that I got simply wasn't worth the price, at least not for me. Now, I don't think that the Apple Watch SE is a particularly good looking watch, not even for a smartwatch, but I do kind of like the design in sort of a throwback way. It really does make me almost a bit nostalgic because it reminds me of my old iPhone 6S. And what I certainly do like about it is the fact that this is not too big. And I think especially with this leather strap, which is again by Hirsch, it looks decent enough and isn't as much of an eyesore as other smartwatches. In terms of the functionality, I especially enjoy this home screen because at a glance this shows me the time obviously and the day and the date, but also the temperature and the weather in the area that I'm currently in and what the weather will be like for the next few hours. It also shows me the altitude and, one of my favorite features, at what time the next sunset or sunrise will happen. I can also see my rings, which with the Apple Watch is basically keeping track of how much you've moved and how much calories you've burned on any given day, and I can quickly start a workout if I want to. So over the past 14 months or so that I've owned this watch, I've certainly grown to enjoy and appreciate all of its functionality, and much to my own surprise, I'm still wearing this a lot, especially when I'm out hiking or when I'm outside shooting photos. But yeah, with that being said, it's still an Apple Watch, and honestly, I'm not sure if I'm ever going to get another one. It is nice to have, don't get me wrong, but it's also kind of a gimmick. This one cost me only about 250 euros or something, which I think is a fair price point for all of the functionality that you get, but I certainly wouldn't spend a whole lot more to get another smartwatch. But anyway, with that being said, the Junghans Max Build is still by far and away my favorite watch out of my collection. I just absolutely love it to death. And yeah, that's it. That's my 3-watch collection. I hope you enjoyed this video, even though it was a bit more informal and less scripted than my videos usually are. That's it. Until next week, take good care. Bye bye.